This shit. Come on, Patreon. What's up, y'all? I'm trying to mute Patreon. Excuse that. Excuse that. This double play. Hold on. Let me make sure y'all good over there on Patreon. I'm here, y'all. But there's some technical difficulties going on. Alright. It's some technical oh shit, I ain't even got my camera open. There we go. Alright, we back. We good, we good, we good, we good. Shit. Sorry about that. Sorry about that. What's up, Rocky? Sorry about that. That was some BS. But yeah, we here. What's up, everybody on YouTube? We're on YouTube and Patreon at the same time. And here's the reason why we're on YouTube and Patreon at the same time. We're going to do our normal YouTube broadcast about this, but we're going to go into a deep dive with the music. We're going to go into a deep dive with the music. That's only going to be available on Patreon because I ain't trying to get a YouTube strike. I want to do a narrative of what I'm talking about, but I also want to do a sonic version of it too, so I can be thorough. Because I'm already understanding just based on the title, these hip hop niggas gonna come in here, oh, you just hating. But as you understand, at this channel, we do not placate to the you just hating crowd. We educate the willingness to learn crowd. You dig? So with that being said, what's up, everybody? What's up, everybody? What's up, chat? What's up, chat? What's up, everybody? Because I saw this is coming on. This is coming from today's episode is coming from two different angles. It's coming from two different angles. One, I saw this video that which I'm about to play on Facebook a couple days ago, on Wednesday. And then yesterday I had my father-in-law's funeral, Mr. James Carmichael, and it was a lot of it was so much, it was such a beautiful service, but a lot of people who worked with him talked about how his style of work and about how the sound was always moving forward. The thing was to never rest, to move forward. Don't go back on what you did. Don't go back on what other people did. Use what they did as inspiration to push the sound forward. And how that was once a philosophy in music that seems to have been forgotten over the last 30 years. And then I was talking to a lot of people in the repass. I was speaking with Norman Whitfield's manager, one of the greatest producers of all time. If you don't know who Norman Whitfield is, look him up. Norman Whitfield was a major mentor to James Carmichael at Motown. Norman Whitfield put up a lot of your Temptations hits, doing fine on Cloud 9. He was behind Rolls Royce. And Norman Whitfield is actually, his song Heard It Through the Grapevine is actually low key what funded hip hop. That's what funded Priority Records. His songs I Heard It Through the Grapevine was then used by the California Raisins. Y'all remember the California Raisins commercials? And that's how Priority Records raised the money to sign NWA. Priority Records is also behind No Limit. They're behind Death Row. They're behind Ice Cube. You know, but all of that started with a song called Heard It Through the Grapevine. That was the Marvin Gaye version that was done by the California Raisins. Bit of history. But it's also telling you about the profoundness and the necessity to push the sound forward. All right? If you feel what you're saying, donate to my Black American Music Family Tree Foundation. And yeah, let's start out with the video that inspired this. Rocky, you need some water, little nigga. Hold on, where is the I'm looking for the Facebook inbox. I inboxed it to myself on Facebook. No, I saved it. Here it is. Hey, Rocky. Tell everybody hi. You grunting? Your ear itch? Your ear itch? Tell everybody what's up. You say what's up, Rocky? All right, there you go. All right, so let's watch the video that inspired this.
Except you niggas that every other field studies their fucking craft except you niggas that want to make music, and you want to get mad at me because I said learn what music is if you want to make music.
Greetings, my name is Jason Marcellus, and we've got to expand on...
And I'm going to listen to, because Jason Marcellus made a great response to this, but what she said was really what started it. And here's the reason why I'm putting this on hip hop is because you don't really see this. You don't see this in jazz. And when I say hip hop, I'm including house too. Hip hop house. You don't see this in jazz. You don't see this. This is bled over into R&B. It has. But it came in by way of hip hop and the sampling nature. The repeating what was done and the not studying what comes before you. And the reason why I say that so affirmatively is because when you go around listening to 99% of people talk about hip hop, they're speaking of it as if it's its own unique thing, not a continuum of the things of the past. And if they don't see it as a continuum of the things of the past, it's only because they don't understand the past. The funk generation knows it came from bebop and jazz. Same thing with the rock and roll, the heavy metal generation knows it came from the blues. This is all very, very clear. And even the white musicians don't even lie about it. They all understand. The early jazz musicians understood they came from stride. Stride understood it came from ragtime. When you study music history as closely as I have, people for the most part understand there's an interconnectedness of it all. Even down to the point to when you get to hip hop, the jazz musicians recognize it right away. Miles Davis said hip hop is the blues. That's what Miles Davis said. Miles Davis said hip hop is a continuum of the blues. He understood that because he was saying that hip hop is speaking to society and what's going on, and it's coming from the emotions. Max Roach, I read quotes in this book. This is one of my books that I use, primary books I use to do my research, and for my book. These people understand this stuff. It was like you recognize your offspring. But when we get to hip hop, there's like a cutoff. And it's very, very dangerous. And I care a lot about the kids coming up. And I care about us as a culture to understand the vastness of our culture. So I want to play a little bit of what he has to say, and then we're going to talk about it.
That particular video. So what I'm going to do is talk about the exploitation of the rap genre and how that led to a slippery slope to mediocrity. Now, what I want to do is go back to when rap was first starting to become mainstream. In 1979, one of the big records was from the rap group Sugar Hill Gang, the song Rapper's Delight. It was one of the first mainstream albums. And a musician told me that he was in college when that first came out. And he heard it at the club, and his reaction was, oh, okay, that's cool, that's nice. All right, now where's the newest Earth, Wind, and Fire song? Sidebar, I haven't seen the documentary yet, but I'm going to check it out at some point. But anyway, my point is, you had guys that grew up hearing bands and hearing arrangements. So when they hear rappers rapping over a sample, they're not going to be impressed by that. Now, you got people in the club, you know, dancing along, but still, there's not much to be impressed by that. Now, as time went on, the sampling got more creative and the rapping got better. But what became interesting was this conversation about rap being this new art form and so forth, and there were a lot of debates about that. Now, one thing that I want to mention, too, is that there's a lot of people say that the rap genre happened because instruments were taken out of the schools. I don't know if that's true. I'm not saying that music was not taken out of schools. Music has definitely been defunded over the years, but I don't know if that cause and effect really happened the way people present it. I think it's a way of giving the genre this noble cause of the downtrodden. So I'm not quite sold on that. And also, the rapper Rakim actually played saxophone in his school's band. And I think Flavor Flav can play piano. And who's it? Ali Shaheed Muhammad. He was the DJ in the rap group A Tribe Called Quest. He plays bass. So you have those guys that can play instruments. But anyway, the main point that I want to get to is the fact that with sampling, which can be creative, you had guys that started to exploit the fact that you didn't have to be in a band or you didn't have to work on an instrument, and you didn't have to do much, or you could do less when it comes to sampling. Because sampling can be creative. You have had those producers that will get, say, like 50 vinyl records, and they will sit down in their place and they will play each one. And then they'll get to album 32, 6 minutes in, and say, oh man, I like that. Let's sample that. So you've had guys do the work, but unfortunately, as time went on, you had the people that didn't really do the work. All they wanted to do was put together tracks and beats that people could dance to, but then they wanted the credibility of being a musician. Wow. I remember some basketball player, I think, was talking about some rap tracks or some rap album he was going to do. And then he says, I'm a musician. Cat ain't never been on no bandstand, nowhere playing any music.
I want to make a quick little interruption. I was at Blue Note this week, and I was talking to this cat that was in the band. He has a band called Freelance. I love that band, Freelance. Y'all need to look up the band Freelance. They're out of New York. Some of the baddest musicians on the planet. Justin Tyson on drums, Chad on keys. They're some of the baddest cats out there. It's a band out of New York called Freelance. Well, one of the musicians in that band, he wasn't playing with Freelance for this particular show. He was playing, because you know, people who have bands, they play with everybody else too. One of the band members was playing with a different band. And they said that Pete Rock was DJing with the band. And he was like, man, this show was so goddamn horrible. Pete didn't understand how to fade out the music. He was just cutting it out. He didn't understand the dynamics and knowing how to play in the pocket. You could tell he never played with musicians. And that's some real shit. You know, versus say like a DJ Battle Cat. Not saying all beat makers are crap. Look at I juxtapose that to DJ Battle Cat. DJ Battle Cat also grew up playing the drums and the percussions. So now you can see DJ Battle Cat. There's this other cat called Jahi Sundance. He's with Robert Glasper. And they have like a sound design. They know how to DJ and design sign within the music. Like Battle Cat will go from DJing with Kamasi Washington to picking up percussions and playing the cowbells and shit. So this isn't a blanket statement to all DJs, but it is a statement to those DJs who never learned an instrument. Let's keep going. I'm going to play a little bit more what he had to say.
But anyhow, the point is that leads to people doing less, and then rappers doing less, and then the rapping gets worse, and then people are looking around like, damn, how did we get here? Well, they exploited the shortcuts. In fact, there was a video that I showed a musician once about these older rappers that were complaining about the younger rappers because, well, they're sad. But it was interesting to hear them talk about that. And what the musician told me was, hey, man, don't get upset because some other rappers figured out another shortcut. And they figured out an easier way to do this.
Chat room, have I not said that for a long time? Have I not been saying that forever? I like the way he put it. The reason why I don't take these old Jay-Z niggas mad at the young generation for not liking Jay-Z is because y'all are the same. Not just Jay-Z, who acts like all the music he steals from didn't exist, but his fan base too. You'll be like, man, this nigga, but all the stuff that, everything that he's doing has been done before. No, man, but not the way Jay-Z do it. And I'm not saying all Jay-Z fans, but I'm just, y'all know what I'm talking about. It's like a complete whitewashing of everything you took from. And that's not cool. So now that these kids are in the NBA YoungBoy, or you got the younger people who they're not kids anymore, they're in their 30s now, 20s and 30s, they're more into Drake than they are Jay-Z. You got the Jay-Z fans that are hot. Man, what they mean Drake bigger than Jay? Hell no. No, Drake is most definitely bigger than Jay to a particular generation. Jay was only big to you. But like the same way he didn't show respect and reverence from where he got it from, the same shall be done to you. And that's a major issue that hip-hop as a genre is going to run into. Y'all ain't been giving reverence. Y'all had a whole hip-hop 50 celebration. Not one time did you mention Bootsy Collins, Johnny Guitar Watson. Not once. So it's going to happen to you. But let's go back to the top, and then I'm going to start dropping in what I got to say.
Every other field studies their fucking craft except you niggas that want to make music. And you want to get mad at me because I said, learn what music is if you want to make music.
That's a major issue. Music is such a disrespected, it's gotten, the art of music has gotten so disrespected over the last 30 years. People don't study music. And no disrespect, but the stuff that I teach in music, every musician should know what I'm talking about. If that, maybe not the depths, because the musicians that went further in music than I did, y'all spent more time gigging and playing. So I wouldn't expect them to know as deep. When I pulled back from playing as much, I got more into studying it. But even when I played, I studied it just as much as I played. Because my favorite drummer was Dennis Chambers as a kid. So because I love Dennis Chambers, I had to figure out who Dennis Chambers played for. And that's how I really started to really understand Parliament Funkadelic. I was like, you mean tell me Dennis Chambers started playing for Parliament Funkadelic when he was 17? And that made me study Parliament. And you got to study where you come from. And you also got to study the theory. You got to learn what music is. Music, and here's why that's so important. It's because music has a very high responsibility. Let me talk matter of factly about why music needs to be studied like that. It's because there's a definite cause and effect relationship between music and your mood and how you feel. Make sure you hit the like button. And when we're done talking here on YouTube, we're doing a simulcast with Patreon right now. When we're done talking here on YouTube, we're going to flip over to Patreon and we're going to play some music so I can give you an example of what I'm talking about sonically. So that's going to come over on Patreon. We're live on Patreon now. So those of you who are Patreon members, if you just want to flip over and watch on Patreon, go right ahead. And then we're going to end it. We're going to spend about 30 minutes after I'm done here on YouTube playing music to really drive home the point that we're talking here. Because I could talk for so long, but you really need to hear it. You really need to hear what I'm talking about. So I don't come off like a hater. Because no disrespect, not all, but too many hip hop fans, y'all niggas is simple when it comes to music. Y'all, because y'all don't study this shit. Salute to DJ FaZe. He's not one of them. DJ FaZe, when he has his DJ FaZe is going to have a tribute to Disco King Mario in a jam in the Bronxdale. I gotta find the flyer he sent me. And he's going to honor the Ohio players also. That's what I'm talking about, DJ FaZe. That's how the fuck you do it. You honor where you are and where you came from. But back to what we talking about. As I let Rocky in the door real fast. Come on, Rocky. Come on. There we go. So this is what I mean by did hip hop destroy music? Hip hop, when it gets to the point of not only do you not study who you sampled the music from, there's been a departure from studying music theory. There's that part, not studying music theory and the mood. Music sets the mood. Music has a cause and effect relationship between your mood and your experience throughout the day. And as a musician, you hold the key. That's why you have keys. A, B, C, D, E, F. A, B, C, D, E, F, and G. Because it's 7. I don't really play the keys. I have a very, very rudimentary understanding of the keys. I'm a drummer. I know rhythm like the back of my hand. Keys, don't really know like that. But that's how complex the world of music is. I've studied drums for 30 years. And the drum dictates your body language. When I used to play the drums at church and in the clubs at night, I would play and literally change up my kick. And me changing my kick changed the way people danced. Literally just the kick. And y'all don't even notice the kick from where y'all are. All y'all see is a round drum. Y'all don't even know what that foot, y'all don't even see the foot moving. But the foot dictates your movement. The gap and separation between my foot and my snare dictates the amount of time you have while you're dancing, because Black people dance in a pocket. And as a drummer, it's my job to create a pocket for you to dance in and move to as I remind you where the beat is as I drop it down on the 2 and the 4. The 2 and the 4 is nothing but a mere reminder of where we are as you dance in the groove. That's why they call it groovy. Dancing in the groove. We got a groove. The groove is the pocket in time in the space between the 2 and the 4 that the drummer lays down and how much space he gives you. And whether you're playing Black music or pop music, that time is shortened. Pop music, when it comes to people who are non-Black, they want less time in that space. So you play ahead of the beat. You play on top of it because they dance like pogo sticks. They like doing this kind of shit. So if you're gonna go pop, you keep the snare on time, but you play it a little faster, a little sooner, because they don't like that kind of space. Black people, if you don't give us enough space, we're gonna look at you like you stupid. Like, what's going on here? Those are the cultural differences between us as Black American culture and everybody else. Everybody else that's non-Black American, they like their stuff a little bit faster. They want less groove. They want less pocket. Down to the point to where if I'm playing the show, I remember I had a conversation with Jonathan Paris. He's a drummer for Earth, Wind & Fire. I saw them twice in 1 year, some at the Hollywood Bowl and at the Central Avenue Jazz Fest in Watts. And at the Hollywood Bowl, they're going to play the song just a little bit faster. You speed it up about 5 beats a minute because this is a crowd. There's a white crowd at the Hollywood Bowl that night. So you're going to speed it up by about three to 5 beats a minute. Down there in Watts, the Jazz at Drew, you probably going to slow it down by 3 or 4 beats a minute. For Black people, that's a science that a beat maker don't understand. I had some great conversations at the Repass yesterday. I met with I was talking to Norman Whitfield's manager, and we were talking about that song I Heard It Through the Grapevine and how Norman rose the key to G. And he told Marvin that's where the money is. But Marvin wasn't used to singing in G. Norman and Marvin almost got in a fight because Marvin thought that Norman Whitfield was trying to trace his vocal cords. But that key change was the money. And as you play music, all of these different things matter. The richness when you study it. Because you only study it and learn it to break the rules. You learn the rules to break the rules. But you got to learn the rules first. Not all the time. Louis Armstrong wasn't formally. But here's the thing. There's always a mixture between the formally educated and the non-formally educated. Because in the non-formally educated, they're often the one who had the most courage to push it forward. It's all about pushing it forward and not relying on what was in the past. But although Louis Armstrong didn't have a formal education, he had an education in the way of his experiences. You dig what I'm saying? And getting with King Oliver from in Chicago, then on to New York. So that was all. And then I was thinking about like when I was at the funeral yesterday, one of the members from Atlantic Star, they wrote a speech for my father-in-law, Mr. James Carmichael. And they said something that really stuck out. They said when they got their first 2 albums at A&M were, I won't say a flop, but it didn't hit. Mr. Carmichael got there and figured them out, and then within 21 minutes of him being there, they got their first hit. And they were saying because he didn't come in with this attitude of, I done sold all these records with the Commodores. I done sold all these records with Michael Jackson and Gladys Knight and Marvin Gaye and the Temptations and the Supremes and Diana Ross. He didn't come in with none of the attitude. He came in to identify them as a band and what they needed. And he said that he never relied on the things of the past. He was always talking about moving it forward, pushing it forward. There are new ways to do things. If something inspires you, you have to ask yourself, why does this thing inspire you? And then you do it your way and make it better. That was the philosophy. Yeah, Am I Dreaming? Just listen to the way Mr. Carmichael builds that song. I want you to see, let me airdrop this to myself so y'all can. This is what I'm gonna say. I'm gonna show y'all this video from Then we're gonna talk about hip hop. But I'm gonna show y'all this video. Where is it? This is one of the members of Atlantic Star talking about James Carmichael. Well, not that. This is Earth and Fire documentary, not that.
I'm Harold Johnson, and 1971, when I first
Turn it
got
up.
to Motown, I did my first string and horn arrangement, and that's when I met James Carmichael. And he said, it's a good arrangement, you know. I told him I was tired because I've been up all night copying all the parts out for all the instruments. And he said, oh, no, you don't do that. You have a copying service. And from that point on, we became good friends. And, you know, that was the start of my orchestration and the beginning of a great friendship. Then, of course, the song that I wrote, Let's Get Closer, Dr. Carmichael produced it on Atlantic Star. And It's My Turn Now, you know, both of those songs. You know, so we're good, you know. He's a legend and a mentor.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay.
He was talking about the song "Let's Get Closer" and how Mr. Carmichael produced that. And I didn't get the other video that I had. There's another video where he was talking about how when they produced "Let's Get Closer," it was all about the timing, and it was all about these seasonings. You know, James Carmichael understood how to season the song. I'll play this one little snippet. Well, I played that the other day. I played the other day. Let's Get Closer, and how Nate Dogg and Warren G remade it. Those type seasonings, you don't get that. You don't get those little things without always pushing the sound forward. All these things that hip hop took for granted came from a generation that never took anything for granted. So now let's transition into why I'm bringing this up about the hip hop destroyed music. I'm not talking about this from the point of view of the lyrics. Music has always had degenerate lyrics. You know, you listen to songs like Don't Answer the Door by BB King. BB King said, I don't want your sister around because the little girl talk too much. If you sick, don't call the doctor. You suffer till I get home. And tell your mama, don't come to me, don't come over around our house until the break of day. And that's too late, baby. So tell your mama, please stay away. Go listen to that song, Don't Answer the Door by BB King. Hip hop music has always had degenerate lyrics. Now, did hip hop turn it up some? Yes. Hip hop most definitely turned up the degenerate lyrics. But that's not the point of view I'm coming from today. I'm coming from the point of view of the music. I'm coming from the point of view of the Sonics. And I hear people all the time talk about some, and I'm not going to disrespect it because I do believe music is most definitely better when it's recorded analog on tape. 1000%. I'm in 1000% agreement. Music does come off as more hearty and more full when it's recorded analog on tape. But I'm gonna go even deeper because I've heard some digitally recorded music that can smoke analog recorded music. And here's where I say that happens. It's because of the feeling. When a song is made, the production should match the lyrics and emotion and energy. And when you get reliant on samples and 2-bar loops, you're taking pieces of song that emotionally connected to a different moment and a different experience. And that sample doesn't necessarily connect to the experience of the message in this song. The song that we're performing right now needs the dignity of its own emotional input. And when you become reliant on samples, and that's and samples and stems from these stem sites, you're not connecting a moment in music with the lyric, and it becomes this thing, this Frankenstein monster that people are just not appreciating anymore. Here's another reason why I say this. It's because we as Black people, our music has the greatest effect on everything. And what we create and start, everyone else picks up. The hip hop style of producing music has now gone its way through R&B. It's gone its way through country. Country music picked up on it. Pop music picked up on it. So now the norm in music across the board is to make programmed music without live instrumentation, samples and stems that weren't necessarily curated and created for this song. And what that's done is, as people have gotten less creative with this stuff and more reliant on the past, music just isn't interesting anymore. Yesterday, when I was talking to one of the guys at Motown, I was talking to one of the people that was old school. It was like a lot of old school Motown in the house yesterday. It was a lot of old school Motown in the house. Let me show you how this. And we were talking about what what Berry Gordy would do. This is the wreath that Berry Gordy sent yesterday. I don't even like flowers, but I'm like, man, these is beautiful. These flowers made me want to cry. I don't even like flowers like that. But I was like, damn, Berry Gordy. Berry Gordy sent those flowers. But one of the conversations I had with one of the Motown execs yesterday, he said when we were at Motown, when we were doing our QA and quality assurance and selecting songs to put out, he said Berry Gordy asked us one simple question: if I'm a customer and I only have $1, am I gonna spend this dollar on a hot dog or on a record? He said, if the record isn't good enough to make a listener choose the record over the hot dog, you had to go back and produce your record until it's good enough for a user with $1 to buy the record over the hot dog. And that was Berry Gordy's reasoning when he chose what songs to put out. Somebody says every generation says music words, you got to dig great music. Here's the point. Every generation do say that, but you have to ask them, are they right? And the answer is, they're right. I remember even talking to James Carmichael, Mr. Carmichael, about him coming up versus when it got to the 80s. He always talked about how, see, this is what you got to understand. If you go back to what Chick Webb was doing in the 30s, if you go back to what Basie and Jimmy Lunsford was doing, that was at a much higher standard and harder than what was happening in the 70s. Even though personally, my favorite decade is the 70s. I think 70s was the greatest era of music. But you got to ask yourself why. They have a point. Because in the Count Basie days in the 30s, they would play seven hours a night. They would play 5 shows a day in the Count Basie days, in the Duke Ellington days. They'll play all day, and then they would go out and play rent parties until 5 in the morning. They didn't have Social Security. They didn't have food stamps. They didn't have government cheese. Hip hop grew up in much better conditions than the music of the 30s and the 40s. And when they recorded on single track recording. So we listen to recordings from the 40s and the 50s, and they got one take. There was no splicing tape. Splicing came in the 70s with Bitches Brew. And when the 70s came, you're watching Earth and the Fire documentary. They can start recording musicians in different times. And then they can splice things and edit. So the band, the singer, didn't necessarily have to hit all the way. That's one thing Mr. Carmichael, we talked about one of our last conversations. He was saying in the 70s they did splice. They didn't splice much. Usually they kind of took what they had, but you had the ability to. In the 60s, there was no splicing. You had to get it right. The duration of the song, no mistakes. So when people say that it was a higher quality, they're right. It's nothing that you should be offended by just because you like one decade over the other. I don't get offended when people from the 40s say what they was doing was it was. But music of the 40s just doesn't appeal to me as much as music of the 70s. In the 40s, you're talking about 40-piece bands on a recording, and they had to be right the first time. Singers. Ella Fitzgerald talked about that. Ella Fitzgerald talked about how there were no retakes in her days. When Ella Fitzgerald had Jenny, she wasn't necessarily criticizing Shaka Khan and Aretha and those people. She wasn't so much criticizing them. She wasn't. But Ella Fitzgerald said that they have chances to do it over again. We didn't have those chances. What you heard was done one time. So you have to give respect for people who had to be perfect one time versus somebody who can go back and retake, punch, edit, punch, edit, punch, edit, punch, edit, punch. You have to have respect for the difference in quality. You just have to. Mr. Carmichael told me, he was like, yeah, because he started being a studio musician in 1960 when he got to LA. And he was like, yeah, all throughout the 60s, they would get a chart. This is what would happen in the 60s and before. The studio musicians would come in, they would all get charts. Boom. They would rehearse the song one time, and the rest of it, record. And you had to read and sight read that song. But not only did you have to sight read the song, you had to play in the energy of the genre. So he would tell me, okay, it will be a 6 a.m. recording session, and that one will be a country western session. So you got to sight read, but play with that country bounce. You can't play a country western song the way you would play a blues song. And then there'll be a 9 a.m. recording session. And in that session will be a pop tune. You can't play pop the way you would play country western. You got to change your annotation and your dynamics and your groove when you go into a pop. Then the next session to be at 12 in the afternoon. And that one might be a blues session. And you got to sight read and play that. Then you'll have a 3 o'clock R&B session. And then you may have a 6 p.m. gospel session. And Mr. Carmichael was doing this 7 nights a week, 6, 7 nights a week. Recording, sight read, record, then walk across the street to NBC and do a movie soundtrack. There's a movie now, you got to read this score and play it live, sight reading. No edits. Got to pay respect to that. And then when you get to the 70s, when you get, but here's the thing about when you get to the 70s, although splicing and editing has come around, everyone didn't do it yet. You still had to hit your note. There was no machine to correct. There was nothing that was there that could correct your missed note. You had to do it. So when you get to the hip hop style of production with the sampling, you wipe out all that. These people, the people putting these beat makers, they don't have to learn none of that process. Again, I'm not talking about the people who learn instruments first and played in the band. And 'cause I know a lot of people who played in the band know instruments very well. They just produce like this because that's what the record industry is paying for. When you get to the sampler, most of the people who are into that did not study the history and don't understand the theory behind it. And when you don't understand the theory, and when you don't have instruments that can do new things, if you're only dealing with something that can only deal with what's programmed, you really don't get to lean forward and move forward and push forward. And that's been very destructive. Music has been stalled for about a little over 30 years now. Music has been stalled since the 90s. You're right, boy, Shock. It hinders music's potential. Because that's what music is. Music is potential. And when we as Black Americans, when we stay in that space, we run too fast for anybody to catch up. They can only catch up when we slow down and stay in the past. Now everybody can do that. Everybody can do that. Everybody can do that. Everybody can redo what we did. How do you gatekeep a culture when you don't use the strength of your culture? If your strength is speed, then why are you bulking up and not using your strength? Our strength is speed. We move faster than everybody. Nobody can catch us when we move forward. But we've gotten stuck. That's real talk. He said hip hop sample, Don't Look Any Further by Dennis Everett. Way too many times. Overkill, right? Real talk. You cannot gatekeep mediocrity. I'm not talking about this from a lyrical standpoint. I'm talking about this from a musical standpoint. We're talking about this from a musical standpoint. You dig? And when it got to the hip hop time, hip hop brought in too many bad principles. Hip hop ushered in too many bad principles musically. Way too many. And it's okay for a time, but I think that time is done. It's time to move forward. I remember years ago talking to Mr. Carmichael about I asked him, I said, so, and I knew the answer before I asked him this, but I just wanted to hear his honest opinion. I already knew the answer before I even asked. I said, so in your day musically, would you guys just sample anything, like hear something else and redo that sample and then like create a new song around that sample? And he looked at me like he gave me a look like, what? And he said, no, no. He said, no, no. I said, but you get what I'm asking you, right? About the sample world. He said, well, I like the sample world because I keep getting paid. Because he does keep getting paid off them samples. But he said that in the 70s and the 80s, he said, my generation, that would be like a blow to your ego. He said that would be like a way of lowering yourself to take somebody else's idea and as it's your own and make it a whole new. He said that mindset didn't exist. He said in those days we were too competitive. And if I took your sample, a sample of what you did, or what somebody else did, say even if I went back and he said plenty of things I heard Count Basie play that I wanted to play too. He said, much as I love and admire Count Basie, I'm James Carmichael. I'm my own man. Like I can't. It's almost like in a lot of ways he said it was like it'll be like lowering myself to play what Basie played, even though I love Basie. I gotta take what Basie did as inspiration for me to do something and move it forward. He said that was just that. He said that was just not with him. That was with everybody. That was just everybody. He said Leon Ware wouldn't do what I did, or it was all about showcasing and putting your identity on the music. No matter how great what somebody else did was, you have to put your stamp on it. Now let's talk about why this happened. This isn't all hip hop's fault. It happened because of the greater overall plan to destroy black music. That's why it happened. Hip hop was used as a conduit by a larger agenda, from my point of view. Hip hop was used as a conduit for a much, 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 much larger agenda. And the agenda was to destroy our music. Let's break that down. Let's break that down. I saw Voodoo Doll talk about this on her broadcast yesterday, and she was mostly right, but she got a piece conflated with another story, and I want to clear that up. And again, salute to Voodoo Doll. Y'all watch her channel. I absolutely love her channel. Her educational Fridays, her morning jokes. Go subscribe to Voodoo Doll's channel. I love her channel. Just a great. She's really good at telling you a story and moving on to the next topic. Sometimes I be thinking I need to do that. Sometimes I need to be a little quicker in my stories and move on. But that's really just not my lane. My lane is getting very detailed into one topic, or maybe two topics. And I salute, and again, salute to everybody out there. Thank y'all for listening to me. I appreciate y'all. I couldn't do this shit without y'all. Like for real, for real. I appreciate all y'all. Thank y'all for listening. But let's go into this Kissinger report. There was most definitely a plan to destroy music, and it started in the 70s. And then I guess almost definitely, allegedly. Anyway, Kissinger and Nixon got together because they were trying to figure out. You hear this from Bob Law and Dick Gregory. They saw how black music floated the civil rights movement, the same way they saw Bob Dylan style music float the anti-war movement for the anti-Vietnam War movement. They saw how effective music was. So they crafted a plan to destroy black music. And you can go further with this on my Patreon. I have a 5-part series on the destruction of on how they destroyed music. I have a series on Patreon systematically. Go to the collections and you'll see the collection of videos on Patreon on how they destroyed black music. They got together and they first took the messaging, changed the messaging. And what you'll see is a lot of your message music started to get pulled out around 1974, 75. And you can go to my interview with Dr. Logan Westbrooks where he confirms this part on how when he got to the mid 70s, like they started buying up a lot of black record labels in the early 70s. The 60s and the 70s, it was a bunch of black independent record labels and music. So the majors started buying up those black independent records. And what they couldn't buy, like Stax, they destroyed. And Atlantic just gangster Stax. They just destroyed Stax and gangstered it from them. They would either gangster your shit or buy it. And what that did was it pushed out Curtis Mayfield. The FBI was really following Aretha Franklin. It marginalized Aretha Franklin, marginalized Curtis Mayfield, marginalized groups like the Originals, the Shy Lights, and then that they moved the music recording industry from Chicago to LA. Chicago was very important in music of the 60s. The Dells, Minnie Riperton at the time, Charles Stepney, the Shy Lights, the Originals, you know, the Brunswick Records, Mercury Records, all that was Chicago based. But they put out music to put out music and to sell, but it was so much competition, everything got put out. As they started to buy that stuff, and then what they didn't buy, they moved to LA in the 70s. They started requiring bands make more pop style music and artists. And you had, in order to stay around and record as you got into the later 70s, you had to be more pop like with the lyrics. That's why if you listen to Funkadelic in the 70s, George Clinton was very, very, very overt with his spirituality and messaging and music. When you get to the later 70s, Flashlight, he still kept it metaphysical, but he became more coded. Earth and Fire got more coded. Whereas in 73, we are the people of the mighty, mighty people of the sun. Very explicitly black. We are people of the mighty, mighty people of the sun. And when you get to the later 70s, it had to be more coded. Stevie Wonder went from fulfilling his first finale to be more coded as the 70s went along. But the bands were still there. The background singers there. The orchestration was there. When you get to the 80s, they started removing the bands, the background singers, and the orchestration. And they slowly, systematically devolved music. 80s, late 80s, electronic, powerful voices, no message, but powerful voices, beautiful ballads. 90s, no more background singings, no more powerful voices. When Mary came in, she was the introduction of them removing the power voices out of music. And if you notice, they haven't returned. They took the power singing away. And then in the 2000s, they bought up all the independent R&B lessons, labels, and basically took R&B away and put all the resources on the pop level into hip hop. And the only thing that was left was either hip hop or hip hop style R&B. We're talking about on the pop level, not on the independent level. Independents still put out good music. We're talking about what's played on the radio. So that's what they did. They took it and it was systematic. It didn't have anything to do with Lionel Richie. This plan was in place before Lionel Richie was discovered by Motown. This plan got put in place in 71. The Commodores didn't sign with Motown until 73. Okay? So that was the only thing that Voodoo got wrong was the Lionel Richie connection, because it had nothing to do with him. Here's where Lionel Richie did come into play, and James Carmichael played a huge role into this. Lionel Richie came into play with extracting the soul out of black music and making it more poppy, pop style. Lionel Richie was used to make it more of a pop, whereas Rick James was funking. Rick James was getting blacker with his shit and just more ignorant nigga shit with Big Rick James. Lionel was going more crossover. And like what I told y'all earlier about crossover means pulling back on some of the seasoning. And Mr. Carmichael used to tell me all the time when he was with Lionel Richie, oftentimes he would use Toto. So a lot of the live band that you hear is actually Toto. And Toto was a bunch of white boys. He said he would always be Toto and also the Crusaders. Like the black guys be a lot like guys from the Crusaders, like Joe Sample, and the white guys be like Lukather. They would be on the Toto side. And I do gotta say this one thing real quick. I can't all put it all on hip hop for not giving it up for the old. Some of these niggas in R&B too. Like when Mr. Carmichael died, I notified the Commodores fan page, and them niggas didn't say shit. Whoever runs the Commodores fan page he's probably some young hipster that don't really know shit about music. But I emailed them and inboxed them on Facebook, and them niggas didn't say shit when he died. And he has everything to do with their success from day one. They were a college band, and he took them to the top of the world. And the Commodores didn't say shit. Didn't nobody from Toto say shit as much work as he gave Toto in the early 80s? Did none of them motherfuckers say nothing? I said it. Commodores ain't say shit. Now Lionel sent some beautiful flowers too. I didn't take a picture of the pictures. I didn't take a picture of the flowers that Lionel sent. Lionel's on the road. And I understand with Lionel, one thing about Mr. Carmichael, he was very, very secluded. He was very private. One thing he did not want was the attention in the spotlight. He did not want that. Ooh, he was very averse to fame because he saw what fame does to people as a musician. He saw people come in Motown one way and leave out another way. He saw that all throughout his career. So he didn't want that fame thing. He didn't want that. But I did think that it was very disrespectful that the Commodore's YouTube, I'm not their YouTube, their Facebook page didn't even acknowledge his death when literally every single Commodore song you heard, he was in that booth. Literally every single one. From their first hit, Machine Gun, to their last hit, Night Shift, James Carmichael was in that booth. And their Facebook page never even acknowledged his transition. That's fucked up. I do gotta say that I can't hold that in. That's fucked up. And it bothered me. I ain't gonna sit here and lie like, nah. Hell no, that shit bothered me. And when I think about all the people in music that have sampled this shit, y'all full of shit. But that's the thing, going back to music and the original topic of this. People don't study music. If I'm gonna use your sample even one time, I gotta know all about you. But going back to it, did hip hop destroy music and musicality? Yeah. Music, I can say for certain, yeah, it did. And not that it did it on purpose, it was used as a tool by a greater hand at play. This nigga Biz Martie a fool. He said the plan was there before Lionel had that escrow, right? Now, what Lionel did was, and Mr. James Carmichael, what they did was they showed a black crossover act. But it was still very soulful, a different texture of soul. You got to understand, the same producer that made Penny Lover and Hello Is It Me You're Looking For also made Brick House. One of the funkiest songs ever recorded. Both of those come from black roots out of Alabama. Brick House, Hello is as truly dancing on the ceiling. Dancing on the ceiling is as crossover can get. But this is arranged by the same person that arranged Neither One of Us by Gladys Knight. Neither One of Us is so goddamn soulful. Same black roots. Oh yeah, Love Will Find a Way. Love Will Find a Way has been getting me through this transition, this tough time that we going through my family. Real talk. So we got hoes out here that always want credit for somebody else's work, right? Oh, we got Lupe Fiasco in here. He said all the hip hop break beats on the records from when the records were played by a live house band. And the same thing with a lot of Death Row. A lot of Death Row was played by a live band. Again, this isn't a conversation about all of it. I think Q-Tip and what he was doing was still pushing things forward. The way Q-Tip sampled, the way Dre sampled, the way Battle Cat, DJ Quick. This isn't a blanket statement on all of hip hop, but it is an example of a style, a dominant style of hip hop that has become reliant on it. We cannot deny that the reliant, even playing a live sample. Let's go to even playing a live sample. That's great. Too Short and Banks and them would do it. Like songs like Sample the Funk by Too Short and Banks. It still installed a mindset of replaying what was done before. When music is an infinite amount of possibility. Jay Dilla. Thank you, Wally. That's another good one. Jay Dilla was another one. Because Jay Dilla really ushered in the lo-fi sound, which really comes from Mizell Brothers production. Again, if you're going to understand Jay Dilla, it doesn't start with Jay Dilla. It starts with Mizell Brothers, Skip Scarborough, which comes from Miles Davis modal. The Miles Davis modal sound fused with funk gave us the Mizell Brothers style production. That's Roy Ayers, that's the Blackbirds, that's Donald Byrd, that's a lot of that Blue Note record. That sound from Herbie Hancock from 73 to 79, Roy Ayers, that's really the genesis of lo-fi. And what Dilla did was Dilla took that mold, used the samples, but Dilla delayed the snare. Dilla, that's the wrinkle that Dilla brought in. Dilla used to make that snare, and Kareem Wiggins is a drummer, the live drummer, that really brought that sound in. But again, Dilla was a drummer. Going back to my thing, the people who understood the instruments first, they're not part of this discussion. DJ Battlecat, Dilla, Dre, the people who understood instrumentation first, they're not part of this discussion. But no, Lupe, covers and samples are two different things. A cover is exactly saying, I'm doing this song. But when you cover the song, it was a complete interpretation of your way of doing it musically. Heard it through the grapevine. You had the Gladys Knight version, you had the Marvin version. Both the songs written by Norman Whitfield, but two completely distinctly different approaches musically. Completely different, distinctly. When you listen to a song like Take the A Train, everybody does Take the A Train. But everybody's version of Take the A Train is a completely its own unique approach. Going back to what I said before, when I was talking about Mr. James Carmichael and our conversations that we had, as a producer, they did not take samples. Norman Whitfield never sampled Count Basie. Norman Whitfield would hear something Count Basie did, remix it into his own thing. Leon Ware will hear what something that Jerry Long put together, remix it into his own thing. But no, you would not take a section that these 4 bars and then build a new song around that person's 4 bars. That no. That wasn't part of the equation. If you want to call in and talk about it, the number's right down there. 323-705-5150. But no, that was no. That came in the 90s and the 80s. Really, it started with New Jack Swing. I like with Guy and Teddy's Jam when they had the little small. That's when it started in R&B. It started in R&B with but the way Teddy Riley would do it, he wouldn't rely on the sample. He wouldn't rely on the sample. That's when it started in R&B. What's up, Carl? What's your name? Where you calling from?
Lupe, calling from Chicago.
Oh, what's up, Lupe? Turn. I hear myself in the background. Hit the background on mute. What's up, my brother?
I got you. What's happening, sir?
I saw you at the Blue Note.
Which show?
You came in with Robert Glasper.
Oh, one of the Rob shows. Yeah, cool. I was just there with Rakim when he did.
I was there the night before you got there. I was there the night before with Rakim. You weren't there that night.
Oh, vibes.
What's up? Let's talk, brother.
Let's talk about it, man. in my capacity as a professor of rap at the Peabody Conservatory of Music at Johns Hopkins University, and as a professor of rap at Massachusetts Institute of Technology. So in that capacity, not as Lupe, Fiasco the rapper, or in the capacity as a professor who teaches music, and specifically rap music, and specifically not hip hop. Just to be clear, I teach rap, which came before hip hop. So I just tuned in. I literally just got off stage here in Chicago. We had a couple shows here for my 20th anniversary for my first album. So I'm actually laying down, was ready to take it in, and I seen this popped across the feed, and I was like, oh, did hip hop destroy music? I'm here for it. I'm here for the conversation.
Yeah. I'll tell you. So you didn't hear the earlier part. I wasn't talking about the lyricism. I'm moving. I'm not talking about lyrics. I'm not talking about subject matter, because lyrically, subject matter. The example I gave earlier was it's always been music that ain't talked about nothing. You know, BB King's "Don't Answer the Door." He told his own mama not to come over. So I'm not talking about that.
Right.
I'm talking about the style of production. And my line I'm drawing is between those producers who took time to learn their instrument and then went into it, and they sample, and the people who understand music and music theory who then use samples, versus the people that are completely reliant on it without studying music as a craft. And and how we've gotten to where music has devolved to the point to where somebody like you's not genuinely appreciated is one, because we're at a point to where because I have my music historical foundation where I talk about hip hop as a continuum. Black American music is a continuum. It continues on, and that's always sort of been understood. But there's this retelling of the story now that it's some new thing, and there's a lack of acknowledgement of the past, lack of acknowledgement where music comes from, and a lack of genuine study on what music is. And that's how the evidence I come up with is how the top 5 conversation has now dominated everything. And it's an argument, it's a fight, not an acknowledgement of different varying styles and music, and a lot of the music theory and music and just really what music is about it's become a fight, and it's become too reliant on samples of a sample and less innovation. Okay. So that's more so where I'm coming from. Not making an overall blanket statement, but making a statement of where the popular hip hop is, also giving historical context of this isn't hip hop's doing, it's a greater tool behind it. I'm not blaming hip hop directly. There's a greater tool behind this, but definitely acknowledging the fact that the musicality, the innovation, and the things that used to be standard in our music, that we've gotten away from those periods, from that through the vehicle of hip hop. That's where we were coming from before you called in. So
okay. I mean, those what you kind of position are kind of classic critiques, of the genre from its inception, right? So people have been kind of making those critiques even at the very beginning, and that's why I brought up kind of Winley Records in the comments. Winley Records has been around since the 50s. Paul Winley, I forgot the wife's name, but he had two daughters. They were doing Malcolm X speeches. Like they were releasing like Malcolm X speeches on vinyl and stuff like that, and they were doing disco. And then when it kind of transitioned into hip hop back in the late 70s, his daughters, Tanya Winley and Paulette Winley, they were like 15 and I think 20. They were very, very young. And that's what I said, when they went in to record, they had a house band, and the house band was actually playing the breakbeats. And that was another innovation with the Winley, specifically with Winley Records, which was based out of Harlem. Breakbeats were big, and breakbeats were specifically for dancing. So it wasn't necessarily to be rapped on top of. So when we think about kind of the core of hip hop production, at least it's kind of original, nascent, primal kind of utility was for dancing, right? For a particular type of dancing. And the rapping and the stuff that went on top, even though I know you said it's kind of a separate thing, it is hard to kind of pull it away from the total musical package. The rapping on top, as you know, was more like microphone control, filling in the gaps, crowd participation, kind of crowd back and forth. The DJ was still kind of front and center, but that the beats themselves was specifically for like dancing. And when the innovation of Winley Records is they would play the breakbeat, right? So it's like the breakbeat, DJs had two of the same record, and the sample was specifically, they played the breakdown because that was the most interesting quote unquote part of the record for people to kind of dance to, right? That's when so you had this long disco record or whatever, it had all these different flourishes and parts and pieces, but it was kind of only one danceable part, at least for those kids who were doing breakdancing, right? So the DJ's job was to loop up those in real time, those two parts, or that bridge section or whatever. So the Winleys was like, look, if we just played those parts, we could have 7-8 minute vinyls where we just playing the whole kind of breakbeat. So I think it's, when we think that, and that's just kind of one example, and that's why I brought up the Winleys, right? To show like, there were full-on musicians playing those whole, it wasn't like somebody sampling, even though they had samplers and they had drum machines even at that time. The Winleys just used their house band to play. So it was musicians kind of driving that style, right? Which we may think now is kind of a little redundant, or it doesn't explore things, all the different chord structures and all the other stuff. It was like, well, specifically, this is what the kids want to hear. That doesn't necessarily mean that they can't play other things and they weren't exploring other pieces. And that's why I think as it evolves over time, you get people like Madlib, you brought up Dilla. There's tons of other producers, right? Mike Dean, other folks who took the sample and that kind of 4 seconds, 2 seconds, whatever the SP12 allowed you to do. And there was something inventive and innovative about what can you do with, a half a second of sampling time. Right. And I'll kind of reprise this as we go along, but I don't want to banter for too long, because I want to kind of get your response like to that part where it's like, this is a very particular part of a record that had a very particular utility that only existed for a couple seconds. And their kind of innovation, if we want to call it that, was taking that and expanding it. Right. And it wasn't necessarily meant to be, as a full composition, a full 20-30 minute piece with all the different flourishes, or a jazz piece or something like that. It was meant to just hear something for these kids to kind of dance to. And in the meantime, some guys are going to kick some lyrics on top of it.
And that's why I say I connect hip hop to the blues. Because you take a song in the blues like Smokestack Lightning, it's a 2-bar vamp, the whole song. They sort of reprise the vamp. And because the blues is about the lyrics, not about the musicality. The same way hip hop is about the lyrics, not the musicality. You need a more simple bed of music in rap, because we're focusing on the words. We're focusing on the message. and the message is what's is what takes precedent. And same thing with the dance. It doesn't require this huge musical bed, and I respect that about hip hop. The point I was making is, and that's why I make sure that I like to always bring everything into context. I'm not saying hip hop is wrong for what it did. I'm saying the music industry, it defunded rhythm and blues. It defunded other forms of music and put it behind hip hop. And then when it did fund rhythm and blues, it funded hip hop style music production. Real Love by Mary J. Blige. Never Had a Love like this before by Faith Evans. Yeah by Usher. Trap and B. It brought in that thing, and hip hop was used, and the hip hop style was used as a tool, as an overall tool, which I explained earlier about how black music was destroyed because you've heard Bob Law talk about it, you heard Dick Gregory talk about it. But my personal story is my father-in-law, we just laid him to rest yesterday. He produced the Jackson.
Oh, rest in peace, my condolences.
Yeah, James Carmichael. He produced the Jackson 5, everything Commodores, Lionel Richie, Atlantic Star, Gladys Knight, B.B. King, Ray Charles, everybody. He told me the story, and I heard Dick Gregory say it first, and I confirmed it with him. Dick Gregory came down to Motown around 1982 with a report that he got from somebody who he knew worked at the alphabet letter agencies, and they were talking about this plan to destroy the quality of black music. And the first step was to take out the background singers, take out the live drums, take out this complexity because of what it does to people spiritually, and how it uplifts spiritually, and how the message uplifts spiritually. So there was an overall agenda to cipher black music away. Hip hop actually saved us for a while, because hip hop for a while from the message through you gave us a message, but you saw how the industry started going towards things that wasn't a message. So when the message left hip hop, it basically took the primary tool hip hop was beneficial to us through, and that was the message. When you take the message from hip hop and you take the dance from it, they're not even dancing no more. They're on their phone the whole time in the club. You see it? They took the dance too. So I'm saying how hip hop, when you defund the other forms of music and bring in this style, now you're bringing in producers who don't have any kind of reverence for the past, who don't study music. You're getting people who can make beats and not really understand how to put sweeteners and spirit and heart and love into the sound, and how hip hop was used as a conduit for that to happen, not necessarily blaming hip hop itself in a vacuum. Do you get what I'm saying?
I hear you. I mean, there's the Harvard report, right?
Yeah.
Harvard's up the street from where I teach, and they actually had a panel on the Harvard report, which is basically the industry. I think it was Columbia Records went to Harvard Business School back in the 70s to do basically a business analysis of black music, right? And they found like here's the optimal place if you want to run a campaign, if you want to do like turkey drive, like that kind of granular approach to kind of market analysis. And for those who don't know, there was a great book written about it. I don't know if it was called the Harvard Report.
Yeah, Logan,
but it was like
I interviewed him, Logan Westbrooks. I interviewed him on this channel to talk about it. It's called the Harvard Report.
But you can actually get.
Go ahead.
You can actually get the actual. I'm sorry about that. You can actually get the actual report itself, right, and kind of go through it and read it. That Columbia Records kind of commissioned. It's like a PDF kind of floating around. I actually got a copy of it just as an artifact because it's just so interesting.
I would love if you could send that to me, because my father-in-law had it. He destroyed it. He said he was scared to hold it. He was like, I don't want them to come after me.
No, it ain't. The alphabet boys.
Yeah.
But just as a that reality of business, looking at a culture or cultural product, which at that point had been commodified, so it was commercialized. Like there were record deals and there was marketing firms and promotion firms and stuff like that. So it was a level of kind of like consumer intelligence that was already taking place. But this was a little bit more, what is Harvard at the time, Harvard Business School? What is their approach to it? Kind of like McKinsey or something, that like a consultancy today when they want to put out a new product for whatever reason. So, and when you read through it, it's like very like, oh, wow, you need to be at this particular grocery store. Here are the dates the holidays that Black people kind of resonate with, things of that nature. So it was very kind of thorough, and they kind of used that as a way. And this was pre hip hop. You know, this is they're talking about R&B and blues and soul and funk and all these other things. And you could extrapolate on that. Not saying that this occurred, this is more theoretical, but you can extrapolate somebody looking at a report like that, having access to that report, and seeing like where trends, they would want trends to be. You know, what types of music activate a little bit more for the general public. You know, everybody's not an audiophile. You know, everybody's not interested in quadraphonic sound, you know, stereo systems, and you can hear all the orchestration and stuff like that, right? Like even today, sampling rates for a lot of these kind of digital audio stations that we use, people can't even hear in those frequencies. You know, nobody's hearing at 44,000 hertz kind of a thing, right? That's more so just for the sake of audio fidelity and stuff like that. But people aren't listening on speakers and Bang & Olufsen systems and, you know, high-end stuff. They're listening through their phone. You know, they're listening through whatever their car radio station, stereo has, stuff like that. So there is kind of a mismatch between, like, you know, things that were made at one level to take into consideration all of the appreciation of the nuances and the musicality of a thing, and then how it was actually kind of delivered to you, right? Like, we're not going to use a majority of this range or what have you. You're not even going to hear those clarinets, you know, once you're in the club kind of a situation. So why pay this dude or this person, you know, a studio fee, a union fee, to come record clarinet that people aren't even going to hear, you know, or they're not going, or it's going to get so buried in the mix or something. And again, I'm just kind of being theoretical, but the reason I kind of brought that up and kind of speaks to what you're saying and things that we're kind of doing, at least in the schools that I teach at, and the students that I teach. And I've been teaching at MIT for like 5 years, and this will be my second year at Johns Hopkins, so I teach at both. And one of the things that we teach is demography, you know, to think about, you know, the demographics. Think about who you're talking to, where they are, what's their reading grade level, what can they actually absorb, when does challenge become turn off, right? And specifically, I teach you know, lyrics, and so I know that's kind of outside the scope, but again, the context being that's no different from a type of instrument. You know, are you going to put bagpipes in this record, or are you going to put 808s? You know, are they going to respond to a didgeridoo, or are they going to respond to, you know, violins and piano, kind of standard instrumentation and stuff like that? So sometimes, unfortunately, and I think this is true throughout all music, you're dealing with a populace, or you're dealing with a mass that isn't trained themselves to appreciate the music, right? The deep, layered nuance, all of the fine details, the mixing that Dr. Dre does. You know, how he's in every instrument and everything has to be mapped across the board. And again, there's a certain frequency, like you're not even going to hear that, right? Like you as a person isn't even going to hear that little thing that I put in there. But for audiophiles and for people who really appreciate music, they will. So I think there's the same way that there's a lack of training, and I agree with you, there is some lack of training. And again, to reinforce at Johns Hopkins, again, I don't want to rant, so I'll kind of keep things limited, is you know, the Johns Hopkins has a hip hop degree. They just started last year. Guy by the name of Wendell Patrick, who's been teaching at Johns Hopkins at the Peabody Conservatory for years, teaching hip hop production. But he's a classically trained pianist, you know. And all of the students who are in the hip hop course now, it's a bachelor's degree, so it's 4 years. They have to take ear training. They have to take composition. They have to take musical theory. They have to take all these other things outside of hip hop and outside of rap. So there is a push to, again, train the next generation, right, or that incoming generation, and then kind of force in a certain way. But even with that, I would still question if there's a tandem training of the populace to appreciate music, right? So if the public doesn't appreciate it in a certain way at a certain depth, it kind of calls into question the need or the utility for a producer of any type of music, but specifically we're talking about hip hop, to have that like breath, right, the expanse of all these kind of musical possibilities when the people that they're performing in front of, they can't even process it, you know?
That's very true, because I look at music overall is like, when, as you saw, as the quality of music started to decline, so did the quality of this thought, conversation, communication, and how we just generally treat each other as a society these days. You know what I mean? You see, and it's not just music; it's the movies too. When was the last great comedy you've seen released in a theater? You know, when was the last? You don't see heist films that are in depth. You don't have these deep films about society like how we had Wall Street back in the 80s that really told you what was going on. The quality of entertainment overall, from music to movies, all of it's been very dumbed down. The educational system, the post, George Bush, no class left behind, class, all of that comes in together. Here's the reason why I bring this up, though. There seems to be a pushback from the younger generation when it comes to music, and music, in order to save itself, is going to have to change because 70% of streams is music before the 70s, according to a report released by Spotify back in 2020. 70% of all stream is music from the 70s and prior. There's a yearning and a listening. There's a yearning from the people for a certain quality of music. And at some point, music is going to have to come back and address this. Although we understand what sells, but it's the reason why they have to make I don't want to get you, I know you're in the industry, but someone like a Cardi B, it's the reason why they got to introduce these reality TV show stars into music. These people and surround them and make a spectacle out of music, doing these online scants and skits, because music is no longer interesting. And that's the root of what I'm talking about here. Overall, music is no longer interesting. And at some point, it's going to have to reverse back in the opposite direction. And the formula for reversing it back in that direction is to learn how to study it from the musicians first, make it interesting, and pull the listener, pull the audience along. Because as we see what's happening in the industry right now, everyone's pulling back right now. You know what I mean? So there's an opening, and I think that there's a change that is in front of us, but it's not going to be in the old way of having this be a format through a megastar. I think the megastar days are, for the most part, coming to an end. We're coming to the days where people are going to have their regional sounds and their own followings, to where there won't be a centralized, but there will be tons of artists with really big followings, and that can get directly to their consumer, directly to their audience. And I think the way of that is by bringing them along with higher quality music. And I just think that that's kind of where we're going, but we're at a funny place right now at the same time because of what you said. People can't even hear it anyway.
I like 2 points on that, right? There is a little bit of a hesitation to think, or to posit that music theory is going to guarantee better quality music. Because there's tons of people that have graduated out of Berkeley, Curtis, I'm just naming music schools for the people who don't know. Curtis, Berkeley, and then there's particular schools, I think, like University of Texas, Austin has like one of the best music schools. I think there's a place in Indiana, I think, that has a really top music school. So you can kind of name like places like, and even places like the Peabody, that are filled with people who understand music theory. They knew music theory before they went into the school, right? They've been training and working and keyboarding and doing things since they were, kids in some cases. That doesn't necessarily guarantee that they're going to create quote unquote quality music, right? Maybe they learn how to play the standards to a point that is, like inseparable, like minute percentage points away from the original, right? It sounds like exact, and they get every note, and they get it in every time, right? Every time, any time of day they can sit and they play that Chopin piece, or they can play that Miles Davis piece exactly, right? But if that doesn't necessarily guarantee that they can compose, right? That they can create new work, or to use your word, interesting work, just because they know music theory. Because then you have somebody who comes in who is somebody who's synesthetic, right? Who just, they hear sounds as color, right? Or they're dyslexic and they can't even read music. They can't even read, words, right? Because their things are kind of jumbled around. But that natural kind of aspect to them allows them to be hyper creative. It allows them to do things that are outside of the norm. It allows them to take the standards and kind of twist them, or put them in a new space. And actually, there's a kind of a push against music theory, traditional music theory, because it's when you look at like what that really means, at least the way it's taught in America, it's like European white culture, right? Just in music form. And it doesn't take into consideration Indian music, right? It doesn't take into consideration music from any other part of the world, right? It kind of like calcified and promoted particular European points of view about sound, right? And what is pleasing and what is interesting, right? It's all coming from the point of view of these white folks, and it leaves out so much of the other kind of musical space, so, or musical possibilities in that way. So even if you go and try and force a producer to go take a music course, if he or she is just studying classical music theory for the sake of studying it, they might just be reinforcing those same tropes, which led to kind of like a hypersaturation, which is what we're in right now, and then a kind of lack of interest because a lot of it is the same 4/4, right? It's a lot of the same
no 6/8, no 7/8,
sounds,
yeah.
a lot of the same structure. Yeah, a lot of that. No matter how complicated you can get, and I don't want to. Just by saying it's European classical white folks, whatever, it's still brilliant. Like it's still fascinating. Like it still has an intense range, and it's still the possibilities are endless in it. But it's one particular point of view from one particular period of time, actually, from one particular group of people who kind of force this is what music is. So I think there is some credit to be given to folks who explore it outside of a standard musical theory kind of training and the things that they create. And I think hip hop allows for that to happen, right? And with that said, just because people are outside of the box or they're being rebellious, if you want to call it that, or a standard, that doesn't mean that they're going to create great things, right? And I think a lot of great music, and you probably know this, and I'll land on this to get your response, a lot of great music was accidents, right? It wasn't planned. It's actually the songs that the artist didn't even like. You know, it took a music executive to bring the devil into the situation. It took a music executive to tell the artist who was just creating and free and was like, hey, no, that part right there is really good, right? Like loop that up, you know, or that song that you were going to throw away, like this is the one. And I think you see that across all kind of forms of art, where it's like, even the creators, as much as we may laud them or we throw out these names, a lot of the stuff that they created was on accident. And you can look at interviews and like, yeah, I didn't even make that song for me. Like that was just something I just woke up and did. And it became that big, and I'm not even saying commercially successful record, culturally successful, right? Was an accident. And I'll land the plane on that.
I'm glad you said that because I want to make 2 points to that. This is a discussion because we have continuing music discussions on this channel where I just throw things out there. But one point of view that I was stressing is the reason why we have the theory and the training. It's the fusion of the theory and the training with the raw soul and the improvisation of the raw talent. It's the combination that is really when music was at its zenith. You had the combination of the two. You know, because the father of American music, Louis Armstrong, wasn't classically trained. Matter of fact, he learned in a whorehouse at 8 years old. You know, he played in a whorehouse, you know, and he never trained, but he's the father of American music, you know. But you see what happened. Miles Davis was trained and he improvised. But you saw when you fuse Miles Davis with Gil Evans, you get modal. You know what I mean? You saw it happen when you fuse Duke Ellington with his arranger. I'm drawing a blank to his arranger's name right now. They have a way of refining because you need the key to jazz, the key to our music is constant innovation. You have to constantly be innovating. That is one of the core keys to our music. But when you combine, here's an example. Skip Scarborough. Confunction was a band that didn't have much of anything going on. They were a great band, but when Skip Scarborough, the person who worked with the Myers Brothers, wrote "Can't Hide Love" by Earth, and Fire, when he went to Confunction, he molded Confunction into that band that really had a sound. Charles Stepney's classical understanding of music combined with Maurice White's understanding of production is what gave Earth, and Fire its boom. James Carmichael, the Commodores were a college band, but James Carmichael was classically trained, and he took their raw funk, their raw soul, and that the fusion gave us those string licks and those background licks. And it was the fusion when you had raw talent, how Quincy Jones took the Brothers Johnson, you know, raw talent, but combined with the theory and with the openness to move on and expand the sound. One story that I learned I didn't even know until yesterday at my father-in-law's funeral, they were talking about the song Hello by Lionel Richie and the story about how that song came out. He said Lionel sent in, you know, talked about it. Lionel said that how that song came about, Mr. Carmichael came over to Lionel's house, and then when he walked in, Lionel said, "Hello, is it me you looking for?" as a joke. And then Mr. Carmichael said, "That's a song. Go finish it." And Lionel said that that's not what this is corny. Hello, what is this? That's corny. He thought Lionel said this is a corny concept. Then James Carmichael said, "No, that is a hit. You need to go ahead and finish that chorus and finish that verse, and let's put this song together." And through just them joking around out of happenstance, Lionel did the lyrics, James Carmichael composed the music, and we get a song that on an album that sold 30 million copies. You know, but like, so that reinforces what you said, and how, and same thing. Another story I heard yesterday was from Norman Whitfield's manager. He was saying Norman Whitfield did a similar thing with James in '73 when they wrote the Commodore's first hit, Machine Gun. It was like Norman Whitfield walked into the studio while they were mixing and mastering Machine Gun, and Norman Whitfield said, "Y'all about to fuck up a good song through overthinking it." And he came in on the mistake. They're trying to fix a mistake. And Norman Whitfield said, "No, that's the song." And they put out Machine Gun the way Norman Whitfield recommended. And that's the story that Mr. James Carmichael learned. And through sometimes you got to go, and the mistake became the song that became their first big hit. So I think we're agreeing in the point of, you know, you do most definitely need that raw innovation. My point of view is, just when I go back and look at the partnerships in music, when Count Basie would get in the 50s and the 60s, if you needed a hit, you went to Count Basie. You know what I mean? Sinatra went to Basie. Everybody went to Basie. When you combine the raw talent with the classically trained and allow space for the innovation and the new, because one thing about James Carmichael was he never relied on what he did with Jackson 5 when he was with Atlantic Starr. He never relied on what he did with Marvin Gaye when he was with the Commodores. It was all about, even though he was classically trained, it was all about new. Bernie Worrell, the keyboard player for Parliament Funkadelic, he was a classical musician. But you see what he did on those keys with those frequencies that that laid the groundwork for hip hop. But that came from a classically trained musician who also understood the importance of jazz improvisation. And I think that's kind of where we need to have a conversation for the up and coming artists.
I mean, I agree. I think I teach, you know, my students that to have foundations, you know, to have fundamental principles that they operate off of. Some of that is music theory. Some of that is market research. So again, like things like demographics, right? Like, who are you talking to, right? Is it more important what you're saying or how you're saying it? And that kind of endless struggle as a creative, as a writer, is always a part of it, right? What is the structure? And then what are the things where you can take liberties? Right? And how do you test it to make sure that you're actually being effective? Because at the end of the day, do you want things to have utility? You know, do you want people to be able to take your record and or your song or whatever you create and use it for something? You know, is it just for the sake of sounds, like beautiful sounds? You just want beauty? And what maximizes beauty? What is beauty, right? Who are you speaking to? Beauty to somebody in Korea is going to be different to somebody that's in Alabama, right? So again, just thinking constantly about the other is another part that I think covers a part of music. And I think that's some of the goal of music theory, right? Is like, what are the things that are most beautiful to the human ear? Right, and what frequencies are you operating in? And instrument from instrument to instrument to instrument. There's a great book that I'll kind of throw out to people called The Physics of Sound, or the sound of the physics of sound, which is one of my students who's a physicist gave it to me at MIT, and it just goes through the scientific side of instrument.
Richard
right?
Byrd,
to give you a particular point of view. I don't think it's about Richard Byrd. it's a very like sciencey book. They talk about frequencies and stuff like that, but it's something that if you went to a proper music school, you would have, right? Even some of the students I know who go to Peabody Conservatory for engineering, they have to take physics. So they take a physics course because they're dealing with, at the end of the day, that's what sound is frequencies, right? How you can manipulate these frequencies and play with them, and what's the most optimal frequency for a particular music at a particular time at a particular venue, and it changes from genre to genre to genre, right? So what like a metal guitar player, what that audience might appreciate, it would sound just like pure noise to somebody who listens to smooth jazz and Kenny G, right? And so there's like certain hard limits. But I say all that to say, like, yes, there is this kind of sweet spot between theory and just non-educated creativity, right? I think even with that, with sampling, and a lot of that kind of transition from the late 70s into the 80s and on into the 90s, which I caught you saying, was the equipment. The equipment went from a sampler, quote unquote. You only had a 0.2 seconds, maybe a bar worth of sampling time, and over time it expanded. So now it's endless, right? But it was like 2-second jumps, a half a second jump, this jump, that jump, where you only had so much time to kind of sample something and make use out of it, right? And it might not even have been. It might have just been for drums, or it might have just been for one for particular sound, or it might have been for a voice sample or something like that, right? But there's still something to people being limited by the tool that they had at the time, and technology allowed people to do that. So there's people who look at MPCs and they look at samplers or keyboards as an instrument. And they play it like an instrument. They have a virtuosity to it. And there's a lot of students I don't keep saying a lot of students, but because the program is actually really small. But there is a bunch of music production students who use samplers as an instrument, and they're just as virtuous with it as Miles would be on a horn, right? And the way they're able to manipulate and understand all the inner workings of it and the depth of it, right? They can spend their whole life the same way somebody could spend their whole life playing the cello, right? And figuring out all of the different nuances and the things that it can emit. And everybody's not like that. Everybody doesn't have those savant qualities, but it's there. So it's this kind of relationship between what does the technology allow you to do, and then at the same time, what it gives, it also takes away from something else, right? So it's always kind of finding that balance of like, what artist do you want to be? What is your audience specifically demanding from you? And then also I think about this, there's different spaces for different things. So there's artists who are purely for record labels, and there's artists that are purely not for record labels. And you brought this up and saying like independent labels versus kind of major labels, but even just off the label front, there's music that is specifically designed to be played at jazz clubs. There's music that's specifically designed to be played in subways. There's music that's specifically designed for just you to enjoy yourself, right? That you created, and it's for you to sit back and listen to, and maybe there's a couple people there who also enjoy it. And kind of got to stop thinking of music, and I kind of push this on my students. This isn't for everybody to hear. Right. Don't think that everything you make needs to be designed for everyone, right? And to follow every rule, and there's a particular set path for you to get there. When I was signed to my major labels, man, we were making every type of record, throwing stuff at the wall, and this producer would come in who was classically trained and all this other stuff versus this other guy who this was his first beat, right? And it was always kind of like, how does it fit within the system? How does it fit within your workflow? What are you trying to accomplish? 70% of the record is done, so let's have that weird record, that touches this or plays with this ideology or plays with that. So I think I'm to your point. I'm agreeing, but also kind of putting it in from the artist's point of view and maybe from the teacher's point of view. When you're dealing with a student who wants to work in a particular way or has a particular goal in mind, that's been trained in music non-professionally or trained professionally. Some students you challenge, some students you reinforce, some things you take risks with, and some things you play it safe. you know. And when I look at hip hop as a whole, going back to the title of the piece, you know, I look at hip hop as somewhat of a preserving factor. Like you said, it kind of saved black music for a particular period of time. But then also, you know, it destroyed it, you know. But it's also that destruction, and out of the ashes of that, I think you get the possibility for new things.
Phoenix.
You know?
I'm with you with that. Like, I'm 2 points on what you just said, because I teach also. And one thing I teach is also is music is regional and it's personal. And the music that comes into your spirit comes through you. That's the music you're to project, not necessarily chase. Because whatever it is coming through you, there's an audience for it. Sometimes your music is coming through. You might be an artist, and your thing is jingles. Your thing is, your thing is something that goes with movies. Your things might be this particular regional sound or that particular regional sound. And that regional sound is going to come because music is a sonic interpretation of environment. So your music that comes through you is going to mimic your environment, which means it's going to touch the people that are living in a similar environment or understand the environment, like say a Thundercat on bass. You see what he does, and you see what these different musicians do. It's about tapping into your own soul and your own spirit. This whole thing about I can touch everybody with my music, that's fake. And it'll only work if you have a major label, if you have Universal Records behind you and they decide to turn the switch on for you. That's the only way that'll work.
Pun intended. Pun intended with Universal, but continue.
Right, exactly. So unless you're that chosen one, that won't work for you. You got to tap into your own soul. You know what I mean? When it comes to music, and stick to that. And when it comes down to it, I just think that like I said, I appreciate what you're doing when it comes to the teaching, because it's all about teaching. It has been destroyed in a lot of ways. But the way I look at hip hop is this. I look at my point of view on hip hop is, if you look at an essay, at a book, at any kind of a thesis argument, you have your introductory statement, and then you have your body, and your body proves in the depth of what your introductory statement said, and then you have your conclusion paragraph. The conclusion paragraph doesn't introduce anything new to the argument, but it can perfectly encapsulate everything that was said before it. I see hip hop as a conclusion statement on 100 years of of recorded American music, starting technically in the 1800s, but really in the 1920s is when it really started to blow up the recording industry. I look at hip hop as a period at the end of that century of music. It restates jazz, it restates blues, it restates everything that was done before it, and it encapsulated into one thing. And we are at a point to where, okay, now something new is coming. We haven't gotten there yet. You see Southern Soul popping off. You see these different. I look at somebody like a NBA YoungBoy as more of a country western blues artist, and I look at his hip hop because of the emotionalism in his music. But we're at a weird, funny place right now that is going to go somewhere else, but we aren't there yet. But my opinion, this is my opinion. My opinion is going to be, that's going to come when we fuse the innovative with the understanding of the classical and where it comes from. And out of that fusion, we're going to get something new and different.
Now, I can't summarize it any better, except with an anecdote, and it might not even be better. And I'll land on this so I can get some sleep. And I appreciate you holding time for me, and I appreciate your audience for allowing me to come in and jabber and spit my little nonsensicals around with them. But and maybe it's things like this that I think encapsulate where we are, where we're going, and kind of where we've been, right? So when I first got my record deal, I was like 19, fresh out of high school, and it was a put together group. It was like, hey, we went to do a showcase, an audition for some producers, and there was a couple label guys there, and I rapped, and the other guy rapped, and I never met these dudes before in my life. That was the first night I met them. I rapped, this guy rapped, that guy rapped, and it's like, oh, you know what? Y'all are a group, you know. And 2 weeks later, here's this other guy who wasn't even there. He's in the group now too. I think he was there, but anyway. So it was a kind of put together group, and we went and signed to Epic Records, right? And so they put us out on the road. The management was a little jank as it normally is, and I remember we were at some, I think, Atlanta, and we were performing at some block club festival thing, multi-generational, different type of acts and stuff like that. We were a brand new act, nobody knew who we were, and for some reason or another we missed our time slot. So they had kind of like a hip hop block. They had old school block, and I hate to call it that because it feels so disrespectful right now. But they had a hip hop block, they had a soul block, they had this block, and so we missed our time slot. So they had us performing later in the day on a different block. And so you had this young upstart rap group that nobody knew, that was a put together group who barely knew each other, and they had us closing for Atlantic Star.
Ha! My father-in-law.
And opening
crazy.
and opening up for Frankie Beverly and Maze.
Oh.
So we were slotted in between Atlantic Star and Frankie Beverly with Maze. So if that ain't, if that don't, I don't know what that means to some people, but take that for what that is, right? And the rest is history.
That's crazy.
Now this is like 2000, and this is 2001, 2000, call it that.
That's crazy, dog. It's funny how things come full circle. And speaking of full circle, you probably won't remember me, but that night that I saw you at Blue Note, I was there. You let Tashina sit in your seat in your booth. Because she had gotten there late.
Oh yeah. She got there late. She came and sat down. I remember that.
She was supposed to be sitting with me, but then she sat you a lot because she got there late because she was other stuff going on. But you let her sit in your booth, and then backstage, Robert Glasper, her family, OnStar is a rapper, and remember Robert said he put old boy on the spot and told him to rap in front of you.
Oh yeah, I remember that. He could really rap.
Yeah, that's OnStar. Yeah, I was one sitting. I was next. We were the ones talking when Robert brought you over to teach him to rap or to listen to his rap. So we've been. It was that night. That's the night that we just said what's up. That night. But that was what, 2 or 3 months ago. Yeah. So that was the night that I was there at the Blue Note when Robert told him to rap in front of you, and he did his thing though. And he really, really appreciated your compliments too. I'm gonna say that.
Oh, for sure. Was that the night Stevie came out?
Stevie came the next night. I missed that night.
Yeah,
I missed Stevie.
You gotta show up for all the nights.
Right.
You did. I got the. And then, so here we go, full circle again. I got the rap with Stevie Wonder.
I saw, man, my people sent me video, and I could have. Robert will hook me up to go anytime. I just was like, yeah, I am that. Yeah.
I'll leave the conversation with this with a promotion for Robert Glasper. Yeah. For folks that don't know, if Robert Glasper is doing a show with Robert Glasper, I don't care what the ticket costs. Make sure you get it because you never know who's gonna pull up on that stage.
You never know. You were surprised. Anyway, we were like, whoa.
But Rob was surprised.
Yes.
But that goes to show somebody who's classically trained, who also is in that sweet spot, right? And what he attracts. Mm-hmm. He's probably the perfect example of somebody who's in both worlds, heavily theory, but also heavily not. And heavily kind of fluid. Yeah. And in that, he attracts everything that he puts on some of the greatest shows, in modern times, I would say, with no hyperbole.
I agree with that.
But man, listen, I appreciate the nutritiousness of this conversation. I hope that I added a little bit of value.
You most definitely
added some value to me. And I will try and find a way to send you my PDF.
Hit me, contact at DwannB.com. You see Dwann B? Contact at DwannB.com. Email me, man, and let's link up.
Okay, cool. I appreciate y'all.
All right, man. Thanks for calling in.
All right, thank you, brother. All right, you too.
Right, yes, sir. That was Lupe Fiasco on the line. So hopefully that shows y'all that, look, I care about music, man. I care about music. And I don't have the solutions and the answers. All of them. But we have these discussions because through these discussions, we get solutions and answers. But it has to be talked about first to get to the answer. So I appreciate Lupe Fiasco for calling in. I'm not taking any more calls because Rocky got to take his shit. I was gonna do my music, but Patreon, we will do a music discussion probably on Sunday or something like that. Either tomorrow or Sunday, Patreon, we'll do the music part. Because I didn't expect Lupe Fiasco to call in. But I appreciate him because I'm glad he's one of the ones teaching in the schools, you know. That's very important that he's one of the ones teaching but we don't know the answers, but we have to ask these hard conversations. But we're never going to have these conversations if people think asking these questions is hate. One thing we got to get out of our lexicon is hate. The word hate is overused, it's tired, it's done, it's finished. We can never grow as a society, as a people, or in any kind of way if any time a question is being raised that's contrary to the popular opinion being labeled as hate. That's why I call myself the cultural heretic. I'm a heretic. I question commonly known beliefs. But the only way we grow is through questioning the commonly known beliefs. That's the only way we get there. We gotta question it, and then we have to have the strength to be able to take a question that may challenge something that we like. Some questions are going to challenge things that we absolutely love. And that's okay. Because if the love is worth having, it can stand to questioning. My goal is to make music better. I love music more than almost anything on earth. I love music right next to after breathing and my five senses and my sane mind and my wife and my family, my mom, my dad. After that, it's music for me. And I'm willing to question the things that I hold dear in order to solve this music problem. I understand it's been destroyed intentionally, but just because it's been destroyed, that's what the Phoenix is about. Earth and Fire, Phoenix horns, rising from the ashes. From the destruction comes something new. All right. So yeah, Patreon. We'll do the music part another day. All right, Patreon, and everybody here on YouTube. Appreciate y'all for listening. All right. Donate to the foundation. We out.